Okay, bonjour à tous. Hello, everybody. Just to keep the schedule, we will have our next talk with Martin Coxall that will talk about BSV blockchain and the ways they want to reach 1 trillion transaction in a week. Martin, the floor is yours.
Good. Thanks for that, Pierre, for the introduction. So I'll repeat a few things which are on screen. My name is Martin Coxall. I'm the Director of Growth at the BSV Association. BSV stands for Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. I'm sure you all know the word Bitcoin. Satoshi, maybe you may not be familiar with that word. Satoshi Nakamoto is the anonymous creator of Bitcoin, who published a white paper in 2008, which started the story of Bitcoin and blockchain and many other things, which is why I find myself here today to tell you about the BSV blockchain. Feel free to scan the QR code and add me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect at any point. And I'll get started on telling you exactly why and how we are looking to reach 1 trillion transactions on the BSV blockchain in a week. I'll give you quick spoilers. We're almost there. We're not quite there, but we're very close. We've done it not in a week, but in 10 days. We'll be there, I'd say, give us a month or two and we'll be there at a week. We're hoping to do that for today, but we're not quite there just yet. But still, everything I'm about to tell you about is still very much factual and true. So before I start with the how we do it, how do we do 20 transactions in a week? I think it's important to discuss the why. Why would you even want to do 1 trillion transactions on blockchain in a week? Well, let me start here. I'm aware some of you may or may not be familiar with the world of blockchain just yet, or varying degrees. There is in the world, the industry of blockchain, a need for trust. Blockchain itself as a technology has not convinced everybody just yet. Some might say that the adoption is still lagging on its early stages, very much like the internet was in the 1990s. 75% of consumers in UK tell us that they are suspicious of it or don't know what it is really. And governments and enterprise companies still have not globally adopted this technology yet. But like I said, we're in the early stages and we're hoping to get there very soon. There's a terminology in our industry which we use quite a bit. We call it Web 2 in contrast with what's referred to commonly as Web 3. Web 2 characterizes the internet as we've known it for the past couple of decades, which is dominated by companies, and today a cluster of companies which aggregate a vast majority of the data. So a few giant corporations, I'm sure you know the ones I'm referring to, especially in this crowd. You don't need me to actually tell you their names. But they control the data, they control the content, it fuels their algorithms, and it shapes our online experience. Now, the way this happens is data is created. This is my nice graph here at the bottom. We have raw data in the form of our interactions on social media, our interactions with the banking apps we use on a day-to-day rhythm. And that data is put through a series of transformative processes. It goes from being raw data to be classified, it becomes information. It goes from being declassified to then being ordered in terms of priority, it becomes knowledge. Knowledge gives us opportunities for innovation, and innovation basically gives us the opportunity to better everyday life. This is what we'd call a tech push. The technology at the bottom fuels an improvement at the top. Unfortunately, as we've characterized here, there are pain points at every step of this process. This is the main problematic of Web 2. Now, this explains why there's a need for trust, because these pain points that we've seen throughout the transformation of data, they create distrust. So this opens a window of opportunity for blockchain technology. We need to create trust. And the way to do this for enterprise, for high-level usage, governments, is to solve some of these main key points. So trust is one thing that blockchain can help with. We can also ensure that current technologies do not fail and therefore create trustworthiness. And then we need to do so at scale. We've talked a lot about scale today and the impacts of scale on performance, cost, volume of transactions. Which leads me to talk about this. There's a profound misconception when it comes to blockchain. When people think blockchain, they think Bitcoin, they think crypto, they think trading, money. They think that's the bigger part of the game and that blockchain is just a sub-part of crypto. It's actually the other way around. Blockchain is the main value proposition. Crypto is just a very small subsection of it. It's the one that everyone knows about because it's easy to understand. Think about it this way. The word Bitcoin has two parts to it. There's the bit part, the coin part. Most people think they understand the coin part, and they don't, but they think they do. And it's because they equate Bitcoin with digital money or digital gold, which is a whole rabbit hole of discussion itself, but that's the part they focus on. But the bigger value is actually in the first part of the word, the bit part. Bitcoin and blockchain is basically a technology that enables us to store data at the same time that we can actually transfer that data and value at the same. This is why blockchain is the bigger value proposition and the actual technology that's interesting here. So what are the benefits, right? We established that there's a need to create trust, right? That trust can come in the form of various different, components or manifestations. We can do things like creating digital identities for people, for businesses, for devices, right? We can offer a secure means of exchanging, peer-to-peer. This is the basic concept of Bitcoin. It's in the white paper, right? Bitcoin is described as a peer-to-peer cash system, even though it's actually much more than that. And the third part is blockchain provides integrity to data. We're here today to talk about data, how it can be sustainably created and generated and conserved over time. So that's the part I'm going to talk about more as we move along here. So we need trust because trust is essential in business, especially when it comes to data. You need to be sure that you can trust your data. You need to be sure of your data. What's the point? Managing, generating, treating, processing large amounts of data if you're not sure that you can actually trust it, that you will be able to generate those insights that lead to innovation and then improvements in your business. So how do we build trust at scale? I think there's a few key factors here, a few key aspects that we need to take into consideration to truly create a blockchain that works for enterprise and government. So scaling is one of them, being able to basically process any number of transactions, and hence the title of this presentation, generating 1 trillion transactions. But really, for us, 1 trillion is not the end game. 1 trillion is just a milestone to an unbounded world of transactions. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Low transaction costs are an obvious second point. If I transfer $1 worth, $1 of data, then the cost for that transaction needs to be a millionth of that increment for it to be scalable. Otherwise, I cannot build a sustainable business model on that. So that's the other part of sustainability here with data. Resilience and stability are two other key components, which means you need a network, blockchain network, which is operational 100% of the time. You cannot afford to have it fail at any given point. Otherwise, it's not scalable. It's not sustainable. Security is a key factor. And the last one is regulatory compliance, which is not something you often hear associated with blockchain, but it's actually key to adoption. If we want big enterprise, big government to use blockchain, they have to be comfortable with the fact that it's a method or a technology of processing data that can actually be regulated. Otherwise, it just won't stick. So blockchain provides a solution to real world challenges and will ultimately get the world online. Or it will get the world on chain the same way the world is already online. Hence the simile with the internet and blockchain being in its early days, same as the internet was in the 1990s. Back to my nice little graph about how Web 2 has all these problems about the transformative process of data from its different stages and how blockchain can address that. In Web 3, we solve it with blockchain. Every single step of the process is obviously secured via blockchain technology because we store the data on chain, right? We put the data on chain, it can no longer be hacked, it can no longer be modified, so it can be trusted. It has integrity. You can build your business on it. And again, going back to the idea that the blockchain is a type of new internet, well, the same way there's only one internet and we all use the same internet, we at the association believe we could only use one blockchain in the future. And the blockchain that has to be used needs to be scalable. This is why we support the BSV blockchain, which we believe to be the only one that actually provides that scalability. Now, what does the blockchain actually do? I think there's a few misconceptions, but there's one key concept, which is the concept of timestamping. So blockchain is essentially a decentralized ledger. What does a ledger do? It keeps information, but it keeps track of when the information was inputted and enables us to verify who and when the information was inputted and if it's ever been modified. This is the concept of blocks, where there's a nice little graph, and the chain because they all link together. So when we timestamp a piece of information, it is put into a block. And then the next block contains the header of the previous block, and so on and so forth. And this is what creates an immutable chain which cannot be modified. This is what creates data integrity. That integrity enables us to create one single universal source of truth. It enables us to empower individuals and then open doors for all economies. So consider this. In 6 years' time, we're expected to have 125 billion connected devices. This is the world of IoT we live in, and it'll keep increasing as we go along, exponentially so probably. There is one key problem when it comes to blockchain technology and how it can help us scale this increasingly connected world that we live in. It's often referred to as the blockchain trilemma. There's a lot of blockchains out there. There's a lot of coins. If you go onto a website like CoinMarketCap, you'll see there's 5,000 different cryptocurrencies, each one represented by a dedicated blockchain. Well, most of these blockchains, and admittedly all except the one I represent, fall into what was called the blockchain trilemma. They will ultimately sacrifice one of these three aspects in able to basically construct the other ones. So you'll have either security and scalability, or scalability and decentralization, but you won't have security. Most of them go for the security and decentralization. So how can we be sure that the data is going to have integrity if we don't have security consistently and at scale? Again, we cannot. and you won't be able to build an enterprise solution based on that. So like I said, most POW is proof of work, and most POS, which is proof of stake. Most of these networks and blockchains sacrifice the scalability part, but not BSV. BSV sacrifices nothing. We have all three of them, and especially scale. Which concludes the first part of this presentation to give you kind of a insight to what blockchain is, and moves on to my real topic for today. How do we reach 1 trillion transactions on our blockchain, the BSV blockchain, in a week? Well, I have a few elements of answers. The main answer is this word, Teranode. Teranode is the new software we will be rolling out at the end of this year, which enables us to scale our blockchain in an unbounded fashion. There will be no more limits. We say 1 trillion transactions, but really that's just to give you a North Star, something to dream about. Really the upward limit doesn't exist. It's unlimited or unbounded, like I said. So what is Teranode? It's basically a rebuilt version of our existing software. Our existing software is called BSV Node, and it is somewhat bounded at this stage, and Teranode will enable it to be unbounded. It will be fully scaled and moduled in a horizontal fashion, and it adheres 100% to the Bitcoin white paper, which no other blockchain does. So adhering again to the vision of Satoshi, hence the name BSV, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. I've included a couple of more technical sketches from our some colleagues from our development department, just to give you an idea of the paradigm shift and how we're going to move from our current node network, which is on the left, the P2P, where all the nodes are communicating together through the software. We are going to phase in Teranode next year and go through a hybrid model phase until we ultimately only have Teranode live on our network, at which point all nodes will be able to communicate together in a truly unbounded, scalable manner. So Teranode, to give you an idea, because trillion transactions means essentially nothing unless you put it into context. Teranode can support 1 million transactions per second at minimum. That's the baseline requirement we've set for Teranode. And to give you an idea of how much that is, that's already over 10 times more transactions than Visa and MasterCard networks processed together. At peak, they're somewhere between 60 to 100,000 TPS. So Teranode, in its first instance, will do 1 million transactions per second, but down the line, it will do 2 million, 3 million, until we reach a point where the usage will dictate how much it can do, because there will be no upper limit. A few key stats, because we've talked about scalability today and things like sustainability. So 1 million transactions per second, that's 86 trillion per day. Sorry, 86 billion, not trillion. Yeah. That's what Teranode will do compared to the current 4 million, 4.3 million, it can 4.3 billion it can do right now. And then if you compare with some of the other more, some of the other more, I'd say, interesting competitors, which have got a lot of traction. Solana can do over 200 million. ETH can do over 2 million. And BTC, the Bitcoin everybody knows, the one that's worth $50,000, $60,000 depending on the day, can do 600,000 by 24-hour period. Because BTC is capped at 7 transactions per second. You cannot build. It's not a blockchain you can build an enterprise solution on. It's not a blockchain you can build any software on, really, because it will never have the throughput capacity to support scale. Some other considerations, block size. Now we're already getting into our main messaging points here. This is what differentiates us from the other Bitcoins, the other blockchains, it's the block size. The bigger the blocks, the more transactions you can put into a block, and therefore that's how we create scalability and also cost performance. We are commonly referred to as the big blockers because we have already the biggest blocks. Today, BSV already has 4 GB blocks, same as Solana. But tomorrow with Teranode, we'll have 100 GB blocks when we launch Teranode, that is. And in the future, again, if required, the blocks will keep increasing in size until we really see increasingly bigger blocks on a day-to-day basis without ever really hitting a limit. And again, you can compare to the block size on BTC and Ethereum to see that we're already way, way ahead of the curve. Cost is important, obviously. BSV is already one of the cheapest blockchains to process transactions, if not the cheapest. Teranode will not impact cost as much. Obviously, cost dictated by supply and demand. But even if they remain the same as today, it will be the more cost-effective blockchain to use to store any form of data. Which brings me to the other consideration, the sustainability one. If cost is cheaper, if it's cheaper to store one transaction on chain, then obviously we're going to be able to do so in a fashion that reduces our carbon footprint. So the cost in terms of CO2 per transaction is already hundreds, thousands of times lower on BSVs than it is on any competitive blockchain. And we're going to keep decreasing that cost as we get bigger blocks, more transactions per block. The footprint keeps going down. Which brings me back to my whole idea about improving the chain of data transformation and leading to a better world. We know we live in a world with more and more devices, more and more data. $229 billion, that's the estimated value of the big data industry by next year. You can already see from this graph, which is from Statista, I think, that's been going up exponentially pretty much over the past decade, and it'll keep doing so. So these are important considerations. This market pull at the bottom, all these industries which generate vast quantities of data, anything from AI to IoT to any form of digital industry, like the advertising industry, which Vito was part of, for example. They'll keep generating more and more data. And therefore, we need to address this market pull with a correct tech push so that we ultimately end up generating that trillion transactions on the blockchain. And our solution will be to do so on our blockchain, the BSV blockchain. So have we reached it yet, the trillion transactions? Not quite, like I said, but we've done it not in a week, but in 2 weeks. So effectively, we've done 650 billion transactions in a week, which is orders of magnitudes more than any other blockchain out there. If you don't believe me, you can look at it for yourself. You can watch it live. Our test is public. You can see some of this data for yourself. Follow this QR code. It's currently being tested. It'll be tested for 2 or 3 more months. The configuration and the test settings will keep getting more elaborate as we go along so that we know that we have a fully functional product to launch at the end of the year once we're ready to go live. I added a quick extra slide to explain some of the basic architecture of our Teranode system, mostly so that I could highlight our partnership with Aerospike, as you can see, on the data store level. It's a vertical architecture, as you know. And I'll finish on this, just so that you get an idea of how scalable and fast this blockchain is. By the time you've finished reading this slide, we will have put 15 million transactions on the blockchain in a test environment, but on the blockchain nonetheless. So that concludes my little presentation today. I hope it was interesting. If you'd like to read more about this or maybe look into it more, we've recently launched a report, which we developed with the Boston Consulting Group, and which goes into the intricacies of everything I covered at a very high level today. And it explains exactly why the BSV blockchain is probably the only one that complies with the requirements for a truly enterprise-grade blockchain. And that's a wrap.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for this presentation, for being with us in Paris. Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions, if you have. Was it clear enough, or do you have?
If you need a moment, I'll be around at the drinks also.
Yes.
With my colleague Thomas Giacomo, who's also here.
Yeah, you have the mic here.
Oh, okay. So I see that in your presentation, your system is, a couple of orders of magnitude higher in terms of transactional throughput than others. Are there any, what is the basis of your algorithms that's able to do that? Because blockchain is defined in certain ways. And how are you able to, you don't have to go into the details, but at the high level, what are the innovations that have allowed you to do this?
Well, the high level answer is big blocks, right? Bigger blocks. If I create if every block is, if I create 10 blocks and the competitor creates 10 blocks, if each one of my blocks is 1,000 times bigger, then I can put 1,000 times more data into it, right? 1,000 times more transactions. That's the short answer. Now, the longer answer, which I'm not qualified to give you, is how we create bigger blocks, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to speak to somebody a bit more technically savvy. But we basically enabled a lot of the initial codes and functions of the Bitcoin software as it was published in 2008, which have been deactivated on some of the other Bitcoin versions. I'm referring to BTC, Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin Cash. They've all capped the block size. I won't go into the debate of why they've done that because that can get a bit political. But basically, they've chosen to steer those versions of Bitcoin in a direction which could be qualified as digital gold, digital cash, trying to drive scarcity. We've clearly taken the other direction, which is to privilege the bit part of Bitcoin, which is to store data and transfer it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. And thank you for correcting the way we think about blockchain and cryptocurrencies.